actually want to quit. And everyone knows, cancer that kills 4 to 5,000 New Zealanders a year. Thank you, everything to
with this line. Hopefully it comes back. Minister, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Some are more have faced greater problems.
New Zealand Europeans would be smoke-free by 2025. However, it would take decades for the Māori population to be smoke-free, and this issue has been of particular significance to Māori health. That's why we're taking the measures that we are, but also enabling Māori leadership of our health tobacco control efforts.
Is this something that is personal to you? You worked within this field, haven't you?
I've been a hospital doctor, but I came to Parliament a year ago, in fact, and so I've seen hundreds of people who have been harmed by tobacco, and sadly many people die. It is a preventable death in New Zealand, and so that's why I'm so proud our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern to lead our smoke-free effort.
Yeah. What do you make of the argument that, yes, we know smoking is bad, but it is up to individuals to decide rather than government to legislate?
We know that smokers, we know it from studies and from my personal experience, they want it. We're helping them do that by taking tobacco out of the communities and making sure it's less addictive.
All right. Health Minister for New Zealand there. Apologies for the drop out on the line from time to time, but I think you got pretty clearly her determination to get through this legislation and New Zealand's plan to stop anyone now under the age of 14 from purchasing tobacco products when they grow up.
Let's hear now about the World Health Organization, which has called on governments around the world to accelerate their vaccination campaigns as the Omicron variant of COVID spreads. There's been concern that vaccines may be less efficient against the new variant. However, the pharmaceutical company Pfizer has just announced that a 3-shot course of its COVID vaccine was able to neutralize the new Omicron variant in a laboratory test. It's only a small-scale test, but it could be exciting progress. Well, from one who's an associate scientist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in Virginia.
Essentially what we're finding is that even though this study found that 2 doses may not be strong enough to prevent infection, there is evidence that 2 doses will really prevent severity of disease, which is really our end goal here, right? We want to make sure people do not have severe disease and do not end up in the hospital. The statement that was released by Pfizer today essentially told us that if there are 3 doses, if individuals get a full dose plus a booster dose, that they found that increased the levels of antibodies in a person's body by about 25-fold. But again, I think the good news here is that it seems as though that our current vaccine products will offer some protection against this new variant, and this is just one study.
Jab, or is it Pfizer just saying that it's their own, which with the 3 booster, if people have already got the 3rd booster, that they're fine? Because I'm sure that differentiation or distinction is also playing on people's minds.
That's exactly right. And right now, that's all we know, right? This is the study that Pfizer and biotech pulled together, and these are results from that study. There are other studies that are ongoing using different vaccine products, to your point. And so I think we will know more in the next few weeks or so. Other vaccine products are really faring against the new variant as well.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because they're saying, in the case of Pfizer, get your 3rd jab and you'll be fine. There are many people who are wanting to go and get it, but there's still people who haven't, even in countries where they are available, where there's still hesitancy and they're refusing to even get the 1st jab. And hesitancy is one thing. There's also inequity on the other hand, where people haven't even got access to 1 jab.
It's just interesting interesting point, and I think the equity piece, I think, is really relevant here. What we're starting to see here in the United States is less than 60% of the eligible population has been fully vaccinated. What we are seeing is that essentially that inequity is just growing. And what I mean by that is that individuals that have been fully vaccinated are now getting their booster while we still have a huge swath of the population that has had zero jabs, right? So we've seen an increase in inequity there. But to your other point, thinking about lower and middle income countries where less than 5% of the population essentially has been vaccinated. And so there is a real issue here. I mean, and I think the key takeaway from this is that this variant is not respecting borders. To really slow down this variant and mitigate it, it will require global cooperation, which includes a plan to reduce vaccine inequity.
And another key takeaway that I'm sure many countries, particularly in Africa, will take refers to the fact that there should be, when you're talking in the West about having a third booster, rather than hoarding vaccines, there should be a distribution so that other countries can actually get enough to give their populations the first vaccine. I mean, that disparity is just so glaring and so unfair, surely.
It is definitely unfair, and I think that is a concern that many of us here that work in vaccine science have, is that this increase with regards to whether or not we really start to see that this study that we heard today, the data that were released today, if it's replicated, and that if a booster does give you that added protection, is that going to lead to more hoarding? That's not what we need to do at this point, right? To your point, we need to figure out a way that we're continuing to get doses in arms in lower and middle income countries, because my concern is that inequity will only grow. We continue to see these types of studies that shows that a booster is what will really neutralize this new variant.
Dr. Khalid Libaye, who's at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She's a virologist, and someone in Sierra Leone is applauding what they heard, James, from the health minister about those new regulations being brought in to stop smoking. The listener in Sierra Leone says, "Good morning." Stop smoking. I guess the person also refers to anyone else around the world who has a penchant for smoking tobacco. Do add your views. Tell us what you think. This is Newsday.
You can also hear lots of brilliant world service content podcasts. You just need a podcast app on your phone, or you can search for them online. The Global News Podcast is our most popular.
Rapidly rising the brunt of climate change.
The world is so connected that if you really want to understand what's going on where you live, it's going to be very difficult. So, twice a day, the Global News Podcast brings you a snapshot of the most important stories from around the world.
A huge political issue.
A full-scale invasion. The race against the clock.
An historic day.
And with BBC reporters stationed across the globe, you can be sure that we're telling you what's really going on. Our correspondents in Washington, in Beirut,
In Nairobi.
the Global News Podcast from the BBC World Service.
It's stunning.
Search for the Global News Podcast.
The World Food Programme makes some startling allegations about the Tigrayan conflict in Ethiopia.
We'll hear about the latest violence in Sudan's western.
Music stars make their names around the world. All that and more. First, the latest news.
BBC News with Chris Barrow. The United Nations World Food Programme has suspended distribution of aid in the Ethiopian towns of Dessie and Kambolsha after its warehouses were looted by rebel Tigrayan forces. A WFP spokesman also accused Ethiopian government troops of commandeering 3 humanitarian relief trucks and using them for their own purposes. The Hong Kong businessman Jimmy Lai has been convicted for having taken part in a banned vigil last year for victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre in Beijing. Gwyneth Ho, a campaigner, and Chow Hang-tung, a lawyer, were also convicted for their participation. Diplomats from Iran have returned to Vienna for talks with Western powers on salvaging the 2015 nuclear deal. Today's negotiations are, according to the British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, the last chance for Iran to sign up to a deal which would see in return for sanctions relief. The lower house of the US Congress has approved legislation banning imports from the Chinese region of Xinjiang over concerns about the treatment of the Muslim Uyghur minority there. The bill demands clear and convincing evidence that any goods imported from Xinjiang were not made using forced labour. Political support for new coronavirus restrictions in England has been put into doubt, with some lawmakers in Britain's governing Conservative Party saying they'll vote against it. There's been public fury over how the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has handled allegations that his staff partied in violation of lockdown rules last year. New Zealand is to enact legislation that will make it impossible for young people to buy cigarettes. Tobacco over the course of their life. BBC News.
Thank you very much indeed for that news. Hello, welcome to Newsday on the BBC World Service with Bola Mosro and James Cotnell. Coming up this half hour, what's behind a deadly upsurge in fighting in Darfur? In our Africa Daily podcast, we're talking Burner Boy, Black Coffee, WizKid. Why? Well, in part because they're big business. And time to come in and all the sports. Let's go.
The civil war in Ethiopia continues. The World Food Programme has said it's suspending food distribution in some towns after its warehouses were looted. A spokesman said staff were held at gunpoint while food was taken by Tigrayan fighters as well as the local population. More than 9 million people are now estimated to be reliant on food aid after years of fighting. Well, joining us now is our correspondent Emmanuel Ligunza, who's been monitoring from Nairobi. Emmanuel, morning to you. What exactly has WFP said about this looting in these key towns?
Morning, Bola. So what we know so far is that the looting happened several days ago, but the reports are only emerging right now because there is currently an assessment of just exactly what was looted, and this was from the towns of Bessie and from Bolsa, they went to food, which included nutritional supplements for children. And during that commotion, also the locals went to the warehouse, and there was a substantial amount of food aid that was taken from the warehouses. And this has forced now the WFP to suspend operations in Bessie and in Kombolcha as they evaluate their next steps, and it's not very clear yet when they will resume.
The TPLF initially got that kind of gave them sway as they're moving towards the capital. So that's significant. But more significant is the fact that the TPLF, the Tigrayans, have been talking about how their own people have been starved, how the government has been using this as hunger as a weapon of war, and yet their own forces are now found guilty of, are now accused of having raided, food that's supposed to be feeding people.
Exactly, and this report, this statement from WFP does seem to confirm what the government said 2 or 3 days ago when they retook Desi and Kombolcha. The government press secretary, Bilen Seyum, did mention that after they recaptured these towns, they found that many public and private institution buildings like schools, hospitals, and the airport in Lalibela had been destroyed completely, and there were investigators actually on the ground who had been sent to also investigate claims of rape killings and the TPLF forces were in control of these towns.
Yes, I was just looking online and saw that Getachew Reda, who's usually very vocal on social media, hasn't said anything about these allegations. It has to be said in terms of the atrocities you speak of, that the government forces have also been accused of such too, of also heinous crimes. But this one in particular, talking about how people who are reliant on food have now been deprived of it, and this accusation against one that will be very damaging to the northern authorities who've been talking about this, telling the whole world and gaining attention as a result of it.
If you see the numbers of those now who are food reliant, as you mentioned, it's now 9.4 million people, nearly 10 million people are now food reliant. And these huge in numbers started in October. We saw the numbers, around September, October, around 5 million. And now they're displacement of people in the Amhara and Afar region since October. And these coincide to control and displacing tens of thousands of people. And this has been the concern. And now this is being accused of having taken the conflict out of their borders into the neighboring regions and creating this huge suspension of food aid now. And we see further extensions in other towns where the fighting is on, or food aid is not enough, then it will surely lead to a humanitarian catastrophe.
Emmanuel, thank you very much indeed, our correspondent Emmanuel Ikunza.
Killed following days of clashes in the Krenik area of West Darfur state in Sudan. Fighting was reportedly between Arabs on one hand and Masalit on the other, the former often linked to the government, the latter to rebel movements. Last month we told you about dozens of deaths in another part of West Darfur. So what's going on? Dr. Adib Yusuf is the former governor of Central Darfur State until he was removed in the recent coup. He's on the line now. Welcome back to the programme. So what's behind this latest upsurge in violence, do you think?
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it is really sad that the human tragedy in Darfur, in different states, is happening and occurring. And so I think the intercommunal violence across Darfur, in West Darfur, in North Darfur, is a risk for humanity in the region. And that is with very little attention, neither from the national government or from the international community about what is happening in Krenik, in West Darfur, or across different cities and towns and villages in Darfur.
Sudan to a problem. This one composed of, among others, the military, the Rapid Support Forces, that's a very powerful paramilitary group, and also representatives of rebel movements who signed peace deals. Are they the people, though, to bring stability to West Darfur and the wider Darfur region?
I think when people talking about justice, the ordinary people, they don't want just talking about justice or decision about justice. They want to feel justice and they want to feel peace. So this kind of decision has been made several times, but there's no justice there. And I think the other tragedy of this is that is a little concern of remote areas like Darfur. It's really kind of threat. I think it is not one plot, and I am too much concerned about the civilian protection in Darfur and the less attention from the central government. And this reminds me the wisdom of Martin Luther King when he talks about injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Okay, so what needs to be done? But what? United Nations peacekeepers are no longer in Darfur. The central government or the military, whoever you think is in charge, seems to be more concerned with what's happening elsewhere. So what do we need to get a more stable
civilians. As we have been observing since in the past, no any kind of there's no media coverage there. So that represents one of the biggest obstacle I think also full respect for human rights is needed, and this enforced disarmament, because one of the reasons why this conflict has been escalating over time, this arms and the arms and the armed groups, and I really feel that the implementation of the security aspect
implement peace deals and forced disarmament among the things needed, according to Dr. Adib Yusuf, former Central All States.
Now, let's hear a business acquisition that could mean big things in the world of digital infrastructure in West Africa. Main One Cable, which is a Nigerian company which is leading in providing internet connectivity, has been acquired by Equinix, an American company. Now, Main One has been using undersea internet cables connecting Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and even Portugal, and it operates a network of terrestrial fiber across southern Nigeria. Well, to tell us more about this and what who's Director of Sub-Saharan Africa, BPC Banking Technologies, that focuses on e-payments and retail banking. Greetings to you, Frank. So tell us more about this. I mean, it's a very big deal that we're talking about here, isn't it? And it's Nigerian so it must be wonderful for her.
Definitely it is, and good morning, and thank you very much for having me. I mean, as a start, I'll tell you, Africa is, is an important market for us, specifically at BPC. And always what I like saying is Africa is not an opportunity anymore. Africa is happening, and it is happening now. And I really think that is a very, very smart move that was done by in West Africa. Now, this acquisition marks the first step in Equinix's long-term strategy to become a leading African career-neutral digital infrastructure company. If you think of Nigeria, with more than 200 people, it's one of the fastest growing economies. And now, what Main One has done is they've already set data centers in the region. So Equinix coming into this play, it's just part of their long-term strategy and entry of getting into Africa. So definitely, it's a partnership that we live to sit back and look, but definitely it's going to open up the digital in the continent.
And you're saying it's great for Equinix, but tell us about Main One and this deal, because it is. Are you saying it's less of an acquisition, and it's more that Main One is entering into a major partnership with Equinix, which will surely boost Main One and the power and the brains behind it. This electrical engineer who I said earlier, Funke Okweke.
I mean, if you think of Main One, Main One has dramatically improved the regional connectivity and access. And the acquisition, basically, with significant technology, broadband cost reduction to local businesses and consumers. In addition, leasing and revenue for the company. So, Main One has been at the heart of growing the digital infrastructure in West Africa from 2010 to now. And the point by which Equinix is coming in, like I said initially, is just something that Main One has spearheaded broadband penetration in African countries. And the project is creating better access for educational institutions to a wider pool of knowledge and information. So definitely, for Main One, this is an exciting time for them. And there's an article, that the CEO wrote sometime in 2017. And at that point in time, it was not certain really when investors are going to come in. But now, if you think of West Africa, separate from the Equinix acquisition, there's a lot of investors who are targeting West Africa specifically because of the fast growing population, fastest economy.
Wonderful. And Frank, it has to be said that this was no mean feat. It was $320 million we're talking about in this acquisition. So it's Frank Moller of BPC Banking Technologies. Thanks for joining us.
You're listening to Newsday on the BBC World Service with Bola and James. Let me give you a couple of our main headlines. The World Food Programme has halted deliveries of aid to 2 towns in northern Ethiopia. As you heard on the programme, the WFP says Tigrayan rebels looted its warehouses and government soldiers seized lorries carrying relief supplies. And the jailed Hong Kong businessman and pro-democracy campaigner Jimmy Lai has been given a new conviction for having taken part in a vigil for victims of the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre. Now, here with all the sports, it's Isaac Famine.
Barcelona are out of the Champions League. They were thumped 3-0 by Bayern Munich in a game in which they had to win. Barca haven't been absent from the last 16 since the 2004 season. Manager Xavi was pretty honest in his assessment of the team.
Me and the team, we wanted to compete in the Champions League, carry on to try and win it. But reality showed we're not at the level of Bayern Munich. That's the hard truth, but it is what it is. We have to face it, and we have to recover. We have another competition to play, and we'll start again from there.
Here's our football reporter John Bennett on what might have gone wrong for Barcelona.
Sadly for the Barcelona fans, this was very predictable. The damage was done under Ronald Koeman, and to be honest, Bayern Munich were a class apart against Barcelona. They completely dominated the game. Thomas Müller scored the first goal in a 3-0 win, and after the game he said that Barcelona couldn't match their intensity. That's been a theme this season, to be honest. The fitness levels just aren't there for Barcelona. Leroy Sané added a third. Joan Laporta, the president, has called for all the fans to row in the same direction, but it's a huge blow for them.
Elsewhere, Chelsea surrendered top spot of their group with a 3-3 draw against Zenit St. Petersburg. Manager Thomas Tuchel is having arguably his first sticky patch in the 3-2 loss against West Ham, and they followed it up with this performance, and he didn't sound too happy.
We conceded 6 goals in 2 matches. We gave 4 times the lead away. To talk about individual performances is not so high, because nobody can be happy today. Nobody. I think it's absolutely like now after the game, not the moment to speak about individual performances. What they are happy or not happy. Nobody can be happy.
Manchester United played a very young squad. It was a 1-1 draw.
In the last 10 minutes of the first half, we again more or less played as like the team played the weeks before. We were less proactive. We were dropping back too far. And what annoyed me most was the way that we played into the pressing first line. So we sent quite a few pressing indications to them, including the goal that we conceded.
And Chelsea's women will need a point in the final game to ensure their qualification for the Champions League quarter-finals after a goalless draw against Juventus.
Today, because regardless of where you're listening from, there's a good chance you may have heard these things. Generation of African musicians who are being recognized as stars around the world. And it's always exciting to see local heroes make a big overseas. There's no reason for people in their home countries to pay attention, because these artists are big business. And on today's podcast of Africa Day, the talent of people have been telling us that future potential is huge.
South Africa's black coffee. Amazing guy. Tuning up with US R&B artists. Creative sector is booming. Musicians are making. Listen to this one.
Music Awards. On the red carpet, from musician Maluma, who couldn't contain his excitement about working with African artists like Ray Bunny from Tanzania. Maluma, if he's planning future collaborations with African stars, he said a lot is about to happen. In fact, I would say a lot is already happening. Look at a genre like Amapiano as an example. It was born in South Africa's township and has now been embraced of the Amapiano explosion. 25-year-old Forties, I had a brief chat with him about the success African music is enjoying at a global scale.
Maybe we got from international audiences is them trying to understand what everything really is. So I always say for me, you know,
what are you doing here that's getting the world excited?
The world is now obsessed with hearing, you know, people's
global record companies, broadcasters, paying attention.
The world needs to hear our stories. You know, you look at the South African story, where we've transitioned, but we're also a global player. You know, and I think these levels of platforms, MTV, it's great and amazing opportunity to really reimagine the kind of African market we are, but also show the world that we are on par with the best.
International companies, yours included Viacom, have local divisions. Universal Music Group, Nigeria in Lagos, Sony Music, South Africa in Johannesburg, while increasing access to streaming services such as Spotify, Apple Music. There must be something happening.
There's definitely magic happening. There's a beautiful, colorful spectrum. You know, Africa has a diverse with multiple cultures, with amazing heritage, culture, and
that is off and highlight. You look at stars like Westcliff from Nigeria, like Kofi, guys from South Africa. They're playing on the global stage. How do you think their success is changing their narrative? Content is king, and content is good. But the real content enables us to reach different markets and expose amazing genres. And I think we started to spill over fashion, sport, How do we live exposure unified storytellers and through really change the world and make sure that we all align and create
interesting how music can fuel so much. And Monde Twala, the senior vice president in general you can hear more. If you go to Africa Daily Podcast, just click subscribe from your usual podcast. Music on the digital platform. To the entire world acceptable regulatory measures and says the dangers